This is a painting which I made around 10 years ago when I first started out. And this is another attempt of the same painting which I made around 2 years ago. Look at the difference between the two. Why is this painting better than this painting? In this video, I'll be walking you through all the steps which I took to go from making paintings like this to making paintings like this. If you're a complete beginner, this video is meant for you. Or if you're someone who already has some experience, do stick around because you might end up learning something useful. So without any further ado, let's get started. Alright, so tip number 1, use a reference photo. Why should you use a reference photo? This will save you a lot of time and headaches and will give you a clear goal to work towards, especially if you have a large painting and you start out with no plan and put things here and there randomly, you're most likely going to mess up. So yeah, use a reference photo. Once you've decided on a reference photo that works for you, you can draw a simple sketch on the canvas and then you can begin working on your painting. Tip number 2, add depth to your painting. Now what do I mean by depth? Depth refers to the use of certain techniques by artists to help achieve the illusion of 3D space. This can be done in many different ways. For example, let's go back to the two different paintings. If you look at this painting, you'll notice that things that are farther away from the viewer have lesser contrast, lesser saturation, and lesser detail, as opposed to things that are closer to the viewer. They have more intense colors, they have more saturation, more contrast, and more detail. This really helps to give it that 3D look and really adds to the overall realism of the painting. Now, if you look at this painting, it has no depth at all. It looks completely unrealistic because I've used the same color values, the same contrast, the same saturation throughout the entire painting. Now, this point also links back to the first point where I said use a reference photo. If you're using a reference photo, adding depth to your painting should not be much of a challenge because you can observe the reference photo and make a decision to decide what color goes where. Tip number 3, prepare your canvas. Note that this tip does not apply if you're using a premium quality canvas because they're already pretty well prepared and you can start working with them directly. Otherwise, if you're not using a premium quality canvas, you need to cover your canvas with at least 2 layers of gesso, even if the canvas says that it's already been covered with gesso. Now, why should you apply gesso? And what even is gesso? Gesso is simply a substance that helps the paint to get absorbed onto the canvas. And it helps you achieve smooth blends and makes the whole painting process a whole lot easier. Now, when it comes to gesso, you have 2 options. You can buy it directly from the store or you can make it at home. Now, I have a video on my channel where I explain how to make gesso at home. So if you're interested, make sure to check it out. All right, color mixing. Color mixing is a very important skill. If you're good at color mixing, it can save you from having to buy different paint colors. So for example, if I want to use the color black, instead of using the color black directly, what I can do instead is I can mix the colors ultramarine blue and burnt umber, which would give me the exact same result. And another common mistake which most beginners make is that they fail to identify the right colors and often end up using colors which are way too vibrant, which have the effect of making the object seem much more closer to the viewer than it should be. So for example, let's go back to the 2 paintings. If you look at this painting, I've used the wrong colors everywhere. They're much more vibrant than they should be. So for example, for the sky, I've used the color ultramarine blue, which is obviously not the best choice. What I could have done instead is I could have added more white to it, which would make it seem much more lighter and lesser vibrant and much more like a realistic sky. So the way to identify the right colors to use is to use a reference photo and observe it closely. So when you're mixing the color, you can match it up against the color in the reference photo to see if they match. If they don't, you can adjust the warmth, the saturation, and the brightness accordingly to get the desired result. This will really help your painting look much more realistic. Tip number 5, use good quality paints. Why should you use good quality paints? Because they're much more easier to work with and they give better results compared to cheaper paints. Now, the thing with cheaper paints is that it's very difficult to achieve smooth blends or simply add layers to your painting. So if you're someone who's just starting out, I would recommend sticking to good quality paints. Alright, tip number 6, tone your canvas. Now, what does it mean to tone your canvas? Toning simply means to cover your canvas with a thin layer of paint of any color that you like before starting to work on your painting. Now, why is this useful? So let's say, for example, I want to paint a sunset. I would tone my canvas somewhere along the lines of red, yellow, or orange. Now, this will save me a lot of time because I already have the base colors established. And I don't have to worry about those tiny white uncovered spaces, which you'll get a lot if you're not careful enough when working without toning your canvas. So yeah, tone your canvas because it will save you a lot of time.